We are in Kufi Beis, in the Ramah of Sif Tesvav. The Mechaber said, talked about a yid and a person eating with somebody else, when one person is makbid, passes to one person is not eating on the same dishes, or the same plate. Now the Ramah says, Yeshamim, the Mishanism Mipashla V'Kechom, someone who's makbid cannot eat pasakum, V'oichel Macherim She'inin Nisarim, he's eating with other people who are not makbid. So not only the Mechaber to eat on the same plate, the Ramah says, Mutalechel Imohim, Mishum Evo K'tato, he's allowed to eat with them, Mishum Evo K'tato, meaning he's allowed to eat the pasakum, he's eating with them, he's allowed to eat the pasakum that they're eating, Mishum Evo K'tato, says to avoid fights and bad feelings. Since if he won't eat pas, which is the main part of the meal, the staple of the meal, so he too, they will mat him to prevent the Aivah, they will mat him to be over on his hakpada to only eat pas his own.
Isn't it like a neder? But that wouldn't be but someone who's makbid because it's a, so it's like
that's an interesting question. I think of it from that side.
I don't know if it's a neder. I don't know if it's a neder. Or you might not even go in the getter like nidorim because it's a halacha, you know, and therefore, like you say, it's not even a getter or a neder.
Isn't there in the Extra, at the end of Moshe, that one? I think it says that if it depends on
it's a halacha.
No, it depends on why.
He's eating one time suffering.
The other way around.
Right, so I think unfortunately, the person going out of town is not going so it's not going to have them out to dinner now.
So here the guy's permanently changing. Here the guy's just on one time.
I hear you.
Just
Okay.
Okay. And the Ramah ends off in Lumo Mikan L'Shar Issurim. You should not learn out from here to other Issurim. I mean, don't think that if you could be makel about this, you could make about other Issurim. And the Shach explains what the Ramah means is he's talking about chemas akum, which others are makbid also. So the Shach says, chema, if I'm eating a meal with you and I don't want to eat, if I don't eat your butter, it doesn't look bad. It doesn't cause Aivah that I don't eat your butter. Maybe I just don't like butter. Maybe I want something else to eat. So therefore, you're not going to be makel about chem. You can't be makel about chemas akum because Aivah, because there's other ways to avoid the bad feelings. As opposed to the pas, if I'm not going to eat the pas, then it's going to look, at least in those days, if I'm not going to eat the pas, then it's going to look like I don't like the guy, and we're going to make bad feelings. I'm like this, and you're like this, and therefore you'll have to be big. Okay, now, we also had the Mechaber, the Shulchan Aruch brings in Kuf Nun Beis, later in Sim Kuf Nun Beis, there's an Isser, based on a pasuk, there's an Isser to go to the wedding, to a guy's wedding. Okay? And the reason is, and it's based on a pasuk. Okay? You're not allowed to go to a guy's wedding. So the Taz says, that din...
The ceremony or the Suda?
I'm not... I don't...
No, I'm sorry if
I'm not...
It's in a church.
It's nothing to do with the church.
Forget that church. He stayed in church out of it.
It has to do with that if you go to his wedding, you'll end up being very friendly with him.
What reason halacha?
It's a pasuk. It's in Shulchan Aruch, Sim Kuf Nun Beis, halacha.
Yeah, I think that he's talking about the David Run in this sense.
No.
We're not here to talk about...
When we get there, we'll discuss.
We're curious about it. We're curious.
We're not allowed to be curious.
You want to go to a wedding, ask your rabbi. But the Taz says, what I want to tell you,
your daughter.
And the Taz says over there is, what happens if, by not going to the wedding, the guy who works in the next cubicle from you, it's going to make bad feelings. So is there Mishum Aivah to go to that wedding? So the Taz says, Aivah will not be mocked to that Isser, and he says the Svara is because, he says, the reason why you're not supposed to go to the wedding is because we don't want you to get too friendly with him. So if you're going to say that by not going, I'm going to get not friendly with him, that's the point. That's exactly the point. So Aivah is not a heter. Aivah is not a heter for an Isser that's based on keeping you away from the guy. Keep you away from the guy. That's the whole point. This is to make you not so friendly. So if you say it's going to make me not feel good, that's the point. That's exactly the point. Which is not. I mean, you don't necessarily have to say it like that, but that's what the Taz says. Now,
so what about Pasach?
So over here, so what I want to say is over here. So by Pasach, we do the same thing. Pasach is because the Isser is because of Kashrus. So you should say, so Aivah should not be matrid. But of course, there's no comparison because in our case, it's two Yidden. Right. It's between two Yidden. You now need Pasach to the Aivah to the guy. So there, the Aivah to my neighbor, my Jewish neighbor, has nothing. It might overweigh the Isser of Pazakim, which has to do with God. But when the Isser is to a guy, the guy in the next cubicle is the Aivah. So Taz says the all saying, let it be good. I'm not saying halacha. I'm just saying just as far as what he says. Where's this? Kuf Nun Beis. Okay. Halacha. You'll answer a bit short when he comes back. Okay. Now we're gonna.
I want to know what you.
Why? can look it up upstairs. We'll look it up.
I was just bringing it to tell you.
If you have a Goyish neighbor,
Look what you started.
you buy him.
That's third.
Shalom Bayis.
There's Shalom Aivah. There's no Shalom Bayis by it.
Come on.
I'm just,
Halacha's halacha.
guys. I just
Everybody has to agree.
You know what?
I just wanted to say this.
Machaber.
Okay, next. The Machaber said it was based on a pasuk. So the I don't remember the pasuk. I have the Marmar. It's in Shemais.
Oh, move.
Okay. In Shemais.
By Yisroel.
Okay. So now, while we talk about the Ramah about Aivah, I want to talk about some things about Aivah, which is a little bit off topic, but it really is on topic. Okay, which is like this: the Gemara says in Avodah Zarah that a Yid is not allowed to help a guy deliver their baby. Okay, and the Gemara says the reason is because you're meyalid ben l'Avodah Zarah. Okay, who needs you to bring more people to serve Avodah Zarah? Who needs that? The Gemara says you're not allowed to. And the Gemara gives you a whole peckle of excuses that you should use when they ask you to come help, be a midwife. A whole peckle of excuses that you should use to avoid having to do it. The Gemara says, but
What's the Gemara?
Avodah Zarah, Chav Amarav. So the Gemara says, but if you can't use any excuses, if your excuses are not going to work, then you're allowed to. Mishum Aivah, you're allowed to be over on the Isser Miyal Ben Avodah Zarah. Mishum Aivah, you're allowed to help them.
If there's somebody not there,
That's a good question. So the Gemara says he means it's just he feel bad for the lady.
we ever in there when I don't want to say.
Do we call it Tzar Bal Chaim? It has a bad term.
That's what it is.
That's how you should refer to an animal.
But the Gemara talks about it by.
Okay.
If you see a guy schlepping,
That's the Mishum Aivah. The Gemara says,
they don't keep to help him get anything going.
hello, and Matzia.
Okay, so the Gemara, so the din is, if there's no way to get out of it, the Gemara says if our excuses don't work, if they're not going to work, then you're allowed to. This is in Kuf Nun Daled. Okay, in your day in Kuf Nun Daled, this din, you're not allowed to be Miyal Ben Avodah Zarah. Okay, now.
Is that a shaft that you would go into Avodah Zarah?
Maybe you work for the CRC.
It's a guy. Okay, anyhow, so now
I think it's
That doesn't mean this guy isn't going to do Avodah Zarah.
he is going to do it.
I think if the baby dies, they might not get mad at Jews.
Okay, Rega. Now the Gemara says on Shabbos, the Gemara says there are different. The Gemara says that on Shabbos there are different excuses. Okay, the Gemara has different excuses you should use if you want to avoid having to help the guy give birth on Shabbos, and therefore the Machaber in Shin Lamed and Aruch Chaim says that under no condition can you help the guy have a baby on Shabbos, even if there's no malacha, even if it's not a question of malacha, because there's even better excuses. That's what the Machaber says. Okay, so the Magen Avraham says, wait a second. But what happens if these excuses don't work on Shabbos? Okay, whatever the excuses are, whatever the excuses won't work. So the Magen Avraham says you're allowed to help the lady, the non-Jewish lady, give birth. If he says if there won't be Chilul Shabbos, then you can help her give birth. Okay, that's what he says. So the Pri Megadim in Aruch Chaim is medayik that Mishum Aivah was matu the Isser Miyal Ben Avodah Zarah. But the Magen Avraham said you're not. He said if there's no Chilul Shabbos, that the Magen Avraham says if there's no Chilul Shabbos, then you're allowed to. So the Pri Megadim over there declares when he says there's no Chilul Shabbos, does that mean there's no Chilul Shabbos D'oraisa, or does he mean even if there's no Chilul Shabbos D'Rabbanan? I mean, in our case, the Pri Megadim says in our case in Kufyu days we're making about what Aivah is matter D'Rabbanan, which is to eat Pasakim. It's a very weak D'Rabbanan. We're almost at the end of the sin. There's lots of reasons to be making about this D'Rabbanan. What about for a regular D'Rabbanan? Like over there about helping the lady give birth, you could be having a real D'Rabbanan. Would Aivah be matter a real Issa D'Rabbanan, a plain old-fashioned, not a weak Issa D'Rabbanan, but a plain old-fashioned Issa D'Rabbanan? That's what he declares. So that's what the Pri Megadim declares. And the Pri Megadim says, he brings a raya that the Machaber says earlier in Hilchos Shabbos, in Hilchos Haitzah, the Machaber says earlier in Hilchos Shabbos that Aivah is matter in Issa D'Rabbanan, okay, is matter in Issa D'Rabbanan, and the Pri Megadim wants to say, Pri Megadim says, is Machalik as follows. If we're talking about Aivah between two Yidden, okay, if Aivah, there's going to be bad things between two Yidden, you can only be matter a weak D'Rabbanan, like in our case, you cannot be matter a plain old-fashioned Issa D'Rabbanan. That would not allow you to be matter a real Issa D'Rabbanan. But if the Aivah is going to be between a Yid and a Goy, then Aivah is matter any Issa D'Rabbanan. That's what the Pri Megadim says. He wants to be mechalik between who the Aivah is considered. And if you think about it, it's a little bit sounds strange. If the Aivah is going to be between two Jews, then you could do less than if the Aivah is between the Yid and the Goy. You think the opposite. If the Aivah is between a Yid and a Yid, we would be more concerned that you should have bad feelings between Jews. So maybe we think the Jews are going to be Mavatar.
Or Mavad, go get out, Shabbos.
There's no, okay, there we go. Okay. So there's no Mechil. The guy is not going to get over it.
Aivah by Goyim and Sakonas and Fashis.
We're not up to it yet. Okay, we're not talking about Sakonas and
Next week.
We're talking about Issa D'Rabbanan. We're talking about Issa D'Rabbanan because, I mean, you can't be Issa D'Rabbanan for it. But he says maybe for a guy, so maybe for the guy the Aivah borders gets closer to Sakona. You go ahead.
If someone is B'shas Leida, it's called like Sakonis Nefashis there. So we're talking here on Shabbos that she's helping her B'shas Sakona. So that wouldn't be permitted.
So
if there was a tragedy, a fire going on here,
so you're asking that why don't we look at the guy who's having the baby as a Sakona and be matter for that reason?
Right.
I don't know.
Wait, it's not, I mean...
Is that treated as a
Sakana?
Right. A Goy Sakana is usually not treated with the same rules as a Yid Sakana.
With the Geneva Shabbat.
So the Aivah, so that's the question. The Aivah should be matter the Drabanan if you're Obi Garvin is the Drabanan. That's what he's
I'm going even on a Deraisa level.
Why would you matter the
Because if it's Pikuach Nefesh with an Aivah,
what's
Pikuach Nefesh,
so
she could die B'shas
So
Leida.
that's what he's saying. That Pikuach Nefesh for a Goy usually does not count as Pikuach Nefesh.
I understand. The Aivah won't
bounce it up.
Meaning, let's say there would be a fire going on, God forbid, in a neighborhood, and you're a Yid passing by and a woman is screaming, help me, and she has her kid there. Are you obligated? You should just walk away? Midaraisa?
Whatever they do,
Yeah.
Shabbos the rights for good.
We're getting
Fact,
Right.
Okay, how to get there?
I'm not finished yet. Let me finish.
Okay, I know you have a half a page.
I have another page and a half to go.
Well,
Okay. So now, the Pri Megadim makes this chiluk between whether the Aivah is for a Goy or for a Yid. The Aivah to a Goy, he says, would be matter any Issa D'Rabbanan, and the Aivah for a Yid would be matter only weaker D'Rabbanan Tachlis over here. And this.
Would you learn the Efach?
That's what I said. You would think in Svara that the Aivah between Yidden would be more important. It would be more important to prevent Aivah between Jews, and you would think so. But he says the opposite. And this chiluk that he says answers up another shaila, which is the Mishnah Berurah brings in Hilchos Pesach. Okay, there's a din, the Mishnah about Mokum Shinagu, that there are times, what you do if you're in a place where it has a different minhag than you do. And the Mishnah Berurah says, and don't you, if you have a thing that's not just a minhag, you do something because it's a mitzvah that you have to do something, mitzvah d'Rabbanan, and you go to a place where if you do it, it'll cause Aivah. He says, don't be weak and do it because the other people are going to feel bad. Mishum Aivah is not materid. Mishum Aivah is not materid d'Rabbanan. The whole to do the Mishnah Berurah in
Jews.
So the Mishnah Berurah says this whole thing. Now in Shin Chav Hey, the Mechaber said that Aivah is materid Issurim d'Rabbanan. Okay, so the Pri Megadim's chiluk will explain. There, the Mishnah Berurah is talking about between Jews, between one Jew and another Jew. And the Pri Chodesh, she's bringing the Pri Chodesh. The Pri Chodesh has a whole peckle of rayas that Aivah is not matter Issurim d'Rabbanan. Okay, the Pri Chodesh has a whole peckle of rayas, but all of those rayas are between a Yid and a Yid. All the cases that the Pri Chodesh brings are all cases where the Aivah is between two Jews, and the Pri Megadim says that's harder to be made about the case. But where the Aivah is between the Yid and the Goy, then it's matter only Issurim d'Rabbanan. Okay, that's how it's coming out, which helps make things very clear, answer up a lot of seeming contradictions to it. Okay, now, so far, we only talk about Issurim d'Rabbanan. The Mishnah Berurah, in that din in Shin Lamed about being Miyaled Ben Avodah Zarah, he says that all this discussion is only about Issurim d'Rabbanan. He says there are doctors who are making to go do Issurim d'Oraisa, Mishav Aivah, and he gives a whole Misha Para about these people, a whole to-do about what these people, how bad it is that people go ahead, that the Jewish doctors to go ahead to help Goyim, and they say it's Mishav Aivah, and they earn an Issurim d'Oraisa. He says there's not a way in the world you can make Matar Nisha d'Oraisa. He gives a whole taram about it if you want to see it. Okay? Now.
Mishnah Berurah
and Shin. Now,
Shin Lamed.
Now, the Chassam Sofer, a lot of people bring the truth from the Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer says that these ideas that Mishum Aivah is only made matter of Rabbanon, he says that's only in cases where there's no tzad of sakana. He said, but if the Aivah has the potential to lead to sakana, he says then Aivah is matter of Rabbanon. So anything is matter Mishum sakana. Now, what's interesting is the case that he's talking about, the case that he starts talking about, Chassam Sofer, is the case that all of us here would have thought was a shaila of Safek Sakana, which is the rule in whatever country he lived in his place, that the rule where the Shiloh was coming from was the government made a rule. The only people who are allowed to be midwives are people who are licensed by the government. Okay, they made a rule like that. You have to be a licensed midwife to be a midwife. In this town, there was only one licensed midwife, and she was Jewish. Okay, so that means there aren't excuses. There's nothing to say about why you're not coming to deliver the baby. You're the only person in town who's allowed to deliver the baby. And what do you think? I mean, we're not talking about in a more sophisticated place where I don't know what they do even here. But you think in those times, if the one Jew in town, who's the only person in town who's allowed to help deliver a baby, wouldn't come, I would have thought that was something psychotic. You think that the guy, what would the guy do if they heard that the Jews won't come every time you have a baby on Shabbos, the Jewish midwife won't come? So in that case, it's funny. You would think that was he's in the Tshuva talking. That's his case he's talking about. He doesn't think that case is something psychotic. So I guess he understood his times, whatever it is. But he says no, he says that you're going to Drabanan to that. See, so obviously he understood his times, but we would have thought, whatever it is, in cases where there's a real sakana, then you matter. So Rav Moshe says, he said
sakana means to that can get hurt.
Someone
that the person.
No. Sakana to the Jews.
Right. That's what I said. The person could get hurt. The yid,
not the midwife. Yes, the midwife.
Or the yid and then live around there.
Yes. Rav Moshe says. Rav Moshe is very surprised by the Mishnah Berurah, the way the Mishnah Berurah.
Well, didn't you say that some Sofers side?
The Chasam Sofer says that if it's a Safek Sakana, meaning if by the Aivah will lead to Sakana, then it's mutter. Okay? I was just bringing out to you that his example that he says is not Safek Sakana.
Oh.
But that is the case we would have thought so. But the din that he says,
So Rav
Moshe says like this. Moshe is very surprised what the Mishnah Berurah says. The Mishnah Berurah, I said to you, said that the doctor shouldn't go. Mishum Aivah should not be matter the Raisa. Moshe is very surprised. Moshe says, when I lived in Russia, he says, where I lived in Russia, he says, and even where I live here in America, which was in 1979, where I lived, if a yid wouldn't help save a guy, he wouldn't come, as a doctor, wouldn't come and help save a guy, he says, the Aivah is obviously a Safek Sakana. Ramesh says it, and he should be matter. Now the truth is to a medical student or doctor saying that the person should do whatever he can to avoid having to work on Shabbos, to get his shifts and blah blah blah, do what he can. But if he's in a situation where he's stuck and he has to, then Mishum Aivah is matter even in Issa Deraisa. We have no choice because he says it's a Safek Sakana. Because of this, I don't remember if he brings the Chasam Sofer, but it's because of the Chasam Sofer that's a potential Deraisa. Now. And Rav Moshe says, such an interesting deal. He says, if you look in the Mishnah Berurah, it's not in the new Mishnah Berurahs. It's only the old ones, which I don't have with me. I was trying to bring it here. I don't have it. But here there's a space. In the Mishnah Berurah, where he brings this whole thing about the doctors not helping people because of Miyala Ben Lavoi Desara, okay, there's a star in the Mishnah Berurah, okay, and on the side it says, this thing that I wrote here is only true for the Goyim who live in India, who are still over Avodah Zarah. But the Goyim who live where we do, there's no chshas from Yalad Ben Avodah Zarah.
See, that's what I'm trying to tell you.
No,
and you know why it's not a new Mishnah Berurah.
So Rav Moshe says,
Because you know why I put it there? The sisters put it there.
wait, no. So
every same out does it.
So Rav Moshe says, that's not what he said. That's not what he said. Rav Moshe says, he says, how can the Mishnah Berurah stuck that in? He says, that's not true. But why did the Mishnah Berurah stick it in? You know why? Because he was afraid that if he wouldn't write that, what would they do? They'd burn his house down. That's right. Yes, he did. So what does that tell you about the sakana of not coming to help the guy? What is information wouldn't even print it and say it? No, he's saying, but think of the sakana. If he won't even print it and save it because he's afraid what they're going to do to him, what would be the sakana if there'd be a car accident and the doctor would walk by? Ramesh said
that talks about Goyim, it says it means India.
Wait, no, Ramesh is pointing out that the Mishnah obviously was scared. The Mishnah was scared to print that you can't help the guy. Meaning is because it's a sakana. Because if he's going to print that, who knows what they're going to burn the whole rabbi down.
Because it's a sakana to print it, for sure it's a sakana.
Right, so Ramesh says he can't believe the Mishnah Berurah saying it's not a sakana. He says, when here we have it, here, look at the Mishnah Berurah himself. It's not in there anymore. Now there's just a big space. There's a big empty space, really strange. A big blank space in there where the star used to be. And the star used to go to the side that says, this is only for those going who live in India. But it shows you that this thing really is a Safek Sakana. Okay, I'm saying no one disagrees on that.
Say anything about their shaitos on that?
Okay, and Rav Moshe says, he makes another thing. He says, is it true in the Divrei Chaim, who says, his words are, there was a Takanas ha'arotzos, that doctors should help Goyim on Shabbos, even if it involves Chilul Shabbos D'Oraisa. Okay, it's the Divrei Chaim. Okay, sounds right. It is a takanas ha'arotzos to be meko. Ramesh says, what does that mean? The takanas ha'arotzes. What is that? Like, what is
Harutzes mean?
of the lands? Like the ha'arotzes. Okay. What does that mean? So Ramesh says, what he means is like this. There is this concern of sakana that if you won't help the guy, then who knows what the reaction will be to a person not helping. And the potential is a sakana. But there are always guys who think, me, they won't bother. Or in my town, it's okay. Or I'll take my chance. People have all kinds of cheshbonos why they're not concerned about it. So the Rabbanan made a takana and said everybody has to help the guy. I mean, they were doing it because in many cases there's a suffix of a sakana. They don't want people being cowboys and doing what they want to and just and say, I'll be okay, things will be fine like that. So they made a takana that you have to do it in order to make it clear to everybody and nobody should have their own ideas of what they're supposed to do. Okay? So the Mela, he says that in cases where, he says, Rav Moshe's tshuva is all about all the things the guy should do to avoid having to do this. He has 100 things to do it, but if the person is in the situation where if he has to do it and he has no excuses, he has no way to get out of it from helping the person, the Mishum Aivah will be matter the rice because of this potential for what he called a sakana, and he pointed out even if today to me a sakana. The guy might not stand up and stab me, right, if I don't do it, but overall, it may cause sakana to the neighbor with. Okay. Now, there's another tzad Rav Moshe sticks in, which is that it can say that it's a malacha shein shrichel gufa. In Tzitzel, he also talks about this also. Maybe it's considered malacha shein shrichel gufa because I'm only helping the guy. I don't want to help the guy. I'm helping him because I want him to get killed. I don't want to get killed. I'm helping him. What? Right. So Rav Moshe is not so thrilled about it. He says it's a marik. Rav Moshe is not so thrilled about it. He has another tshuva more about it. He's not so excited about it. Okay.
Where is this Rav Moshe?
The tshuva Rav Moshe, this one, the main tshuva is in Chel Dalet, Ayin Tes. Ayin Tes. Okay? Ayin 79. Ayin Tes, yes. Okay. And that's why you said, that's people in Hatzolah, that's what it's based on. I mean, it's coming, Rav Moshe was there, and that's what it comes from, that where there's potential for a sakana, where there's even a far-fetched potential sakana, then you have to be ready. Yes?
I think nowadays it's changing and it's less Aivah because nowadays people stay away from these things because of lawsuits.
Okay.
They don't want to get it.
So you're saying is if the guy has some way of getting out of the situation, like the Gemara said, he might have all these weird, strange excuses if you could use them. But I'm not a doctor. I think that doctors.
Hey, patient calls you Shabbos. They say, no, I'm sorry, to that.
What do you mean it's like this? You're talking about a guy off the street.
I'm talking about walking by.
Yeah. Right. So I don't know what a doctor is.
I don't know if that would be considered a haver. I was scared.
He's not talking.
And you saw that he had a cell phone next to him. Can I pick up that cell phone and call?
90% of the grand facing Bible is supposed to be right behind it together.
No, the Rabbanan thing you can do it.
I'm not talking about. It could be it's a doctor's obligation. I don't know medically, whether they expect you to do it. Rav Moshe's case is by a doctor who's stuck in the hospital. So when he walks over to the guy in the emergency room, sorry, can I see if you have a bris? Before I decide to help you. Rav Moshe said that's Bishop Maybe. You should. Now, a related din, which is negea, a little bit back to the Kashrus. A little back to the Kashrus is a variation of this din Mishum Aivah. It's not exactly, but it's a variation. It's a famous thing Rabbi Shechter likes to say, so I'll say it over. Which is like this: what happens? A company owned by not Jewish people makes a mistake, and they use a trace ingredient. They do something they weren't supposed to do. Okay, by mistake. They did it not maliciously. Something happened by mistake. In a case where the din is that the food really should be usher. Okay, but the Malkum Hefsid Meruba, you could be Mekel. That kind of case, it's kind of a situation where the Malkum Hefsid could be Mutter. So our initial reaction to such a case is, the reason why things that the Malkum Hefsid Meruba things are Mutter, in one part of that is Hatayru Chasam Amonim Yisroel. So we have certain leniencies when it comes to a loss of money or a big loss of money or an inconvenience. Certain kinds of things are more Mutter. So he says, all those kind of things shouldn't apply to a guy. Here the guy made a mistake, so do a bit on him. Let him say it on his head. If the din is that it's usher, it's usher. Malcolm has some ruba for the company, it's his problem. Why is that my problem? I should go with the strict letter of the din. If he's a Jewish company, okay, so I don't care about his money. But if not, maybe I should say I shouldn't care. But that was the question.
Step before that, why is the company, let's say a Jewish company, why is the company's hefsid meruba matter for the consumer customer?
Why is
a company's hefsid matter for the customer?
What happens in your case? What happens if in your house you made a mistake and there was a hefsid meruba and it was mutter? Why is it matter for me, the guest, to come eat the food? Why is it matter? I I don't think it works
That's
like that. I think if it's mutter,
If it's
it has to.
Why not?
You
I
only
think
do it if it's b'diavad, if it's asur l'chakila, you...
It's Erev Shabbos.
no, but he's saying if we want it for his hefsed ruba, why does that mean that the other person should be sort of stuck with that?
Your company made
Once the Torah says it's
I think
you can have a
because I'll say it's
why is no customer allowed to be go with this?
Wait,
I think it's the same.
If you have a guest in your house, you do it.
I don't think it works like that. I think that once it's mutter, should have then mutter.
I'm not sure it's because like we always say that the mother that really have to move is really mutter, we're machmir.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
So you say it's bad to it's mutter. So
It's Erev
So,
Shabbos.
Rabbi Shechter's answer to the question is the Gemara in Chulin. The famous story of Pinchas ben Yair's donkey who wouldn't eat things that didn't have truma taken from it. But the beginning of the story is the less famous part of it, which is Pinchas ben Yair was going someplace with this famous donkey, and they came to a river and they couldn't cross the river. Okay, so there was a river, they couldn't get across it. So Pinchas ben Yair says, the river should split because I'm coming to do a mitzvah. So I have to go across, the river should split. And the Gemara says the river split for him, for a yid going to bake matzahs, who was also doing the mitzvah, and for a guy who was a merchant, an Arab merchant who was traveling along with them. So the Gemara says, it's very good it split for him and the yid going to do mitzvahs. What's with the Arab? What is it splitting for him for? So Rav Pinchas ben Yair explained, and he explained to the river why did they split even for this guy, is that if he won't split even for the guy, then people will say, Bnei L'viyah. This is how you do. This guy's going along with the Yidden. They're all traveling together. So what? You don't treat the guy going along with you with a certain decency also. So there's a certain feeling that people who go along with the Yidden, these two Yidden are going for mitzvahs. He's going for pidyon shvuyah, and he was going to bake matzahs. And the guy was just traveling along. He was just sharing a taxi with them. So you have to give him a certain amount of what you would do for you, you have to do for him also. So Rabbi Shechter said the same thing when you have companies who are helping Yidden eat kosher food. That's what they're doing. They're helping us along in our service to give cookies and whatever other foods that we want to give to people. So part of that is the Bnei L'viyah. They're accompanying us. So we're
Accompanying. I like company.
No, I didn't. No, didn't mean it. They're accompanying us in our job to help them. So Mamela, those kind of coolers that we give to ourselves, we have to pass on, so to speak, for them also.
I would say more Aivah there because I was thinking a different way, but I don't know if it would apply, is companies talk to each other.
Okay.
And they know, we had a problem, they were nice with us, we screwed up, they were, and then we're a Jewish company.
But the goyim need. They're not going to talk about
They talk about everything.
I am signing my company.
I am telling you they talk.
The question is, I don't know if they sit and talk about it. It says, for us, they were not the Chanam B'Shar Yisroel. And for you, they were not.
We had a problem. They worked it out.
But the Maggid Hashem.
We had the problem.
I know, because they don't know Chanam. So it's like, they have to, then they make it because Chanam B'Shar Yisroel.
More than a company, I think. It's more shocking.
Yeah, that's just cool.
Is Aivah synonymous with Darkei Shalom?
It's very related. I don't know if it's exactly the same, but it's the same or very related to it.
What if somebody calls up